B of A gave an upgrade to HPE. We'll just do BOA upgrades HPE. A few weeks ago, Pat, you and I, we covered HPE's earnings. We talked about how the company had done well, really, really strong performance in its Green Lake business. It's had some really sound results on the CPU side of data center. It's been very focused on maintaining that part of the business. And we're starting to see some uptick in all of its AI services as the company did really triple down on NVIDIA and kind of found its lane and stayed in its lane. And in this most recent quarter, it was one of the cleanest the company had, seeing double-digit growth, which, Pat, as you and I both know, and I think I even made the joke of saying, hey, I guess HPE's growth has now matched SaaS growth. So all the SaaS companies that are also growing about 10%. And while one, tend to get forward revenue and EPS numbers that are much, much higher, maybe it's time that HPE gets a little bit more credit. So as it sits around $16 to $17 at the time, they got an upgrade and a $24 recommendation. Pat, you and I don't set price targets. Only foolish analysts on the industry side do that. But we do see that that's about a 30% upside from here. And I think if it's, in my opinion, one, it's a 2-year model to get to almost 100,000 GreenLake customers based on my assessment. And that's a huge thing considering that's a mid double-digit growth, usually in the high 30s or 40% on a quarter for the revenue growth of their ARR business. And I think they were one of the later to really starting to realize revenues from AI. They weren't as early on as some of the other OEMs, but they seemed to do it a bit more methodically. They were a bit more focused on margin integrity and protection, which is something that the street seems to really like. So the OEMs, Pat, other than Dell and this kind of parabolic up and down thing that SMIC had experienced, have been sort of a bit stagnant despite their important role moving forward. HP is a really strong service business, has a strong ARR growth and that as well. So I think those are the couple of things that I like, and I think that's what drove an upgrade. And it's good for HPE because you don't see a lot. It's not like a NVIDIA or a Palantir where every other day there's tons of headlines and tons of upgrade.
Yeah, listen, this company, year over year is getting a lot of respect, and strategically, right? You're looking at HPE decided a while ago that it was going to lean into value versus more value versus volume, right? And therefore, deciding to not compete head to head with Dell and Lenovo, right? And so what they did is they made a bunch of software acquisitions and stitched together an end-to-end cloud platform. They're not done yet, but they just keep adding modules. It interestingly enough reminds me a lot of what VMware is trying to build. And then they're crushing it on edge networking. And then when you lay over what they're about to do with Juniper Networks, it's really doubling and tripling down on areas that make you more money. Software makes more money than generic hardware, and networking makes you more money and has higher margins than classic compute. So what that did is that all came together. I think that came to a head here. I think what we saw also in the quarter, which oddly enough, here's the weird part. HPE got slammed on the earnings for HPC margins, aka AI margins, and then B of A upgrades them for a recovery in HPC and AI margins. Okay, well, what's funny is our initial take was bravo. The market got spooked, and maybe this was they did the double click, had some calls with HPE to understand their margins were actually getting better. And that was the weird part.
And comparatively better to others in the space.
Exactly. And, also we saw on the note synergies from Juniper, as I talked about before, but we also saw anticipated improvements in margins due to the cost cutting measures that weren't directly and only coming back to the Juniper acquisition, but other types of OpEx out there. So it's interesting. The final note I'll make is they talked about a lot about liquid cooling, and isn't it funny how nobody talked about liquid cooling for 20 years, right? It was for the National Labs HPC nerds back when IBM System X, when they were doing x86 servers, this was a thing. Mainframes used to be all water cooled. And now it's showing up in analyst notes. I mean, heck, Dell was an early leader in x86 immersion. I remember even working with them, on research projects, 3 different kinds of water cooling. And then you got HPE with Cray, right? Cray is absolutely water cooled, hence the National Lab stuff. But anyways, I just find it amazing that that here we are. Technology matters.